Many of the Craftworld Eldari are seers or visionaries of some kind, able to read the skeins of fate in order to best shape the future of their people. In pursuit of those goals, many atrocities are perpetrated against other empires and races, whilst alliances with others are often fleeting and designed to manipulate events in a certain way. Perhaps the most infamous of these seers is one who was actually exiled from his own craft world, having shown extreme arrogance and costing priceless Eldari lives in the process. However, his hand has touched critical events both through Eldari and human history, as he has been alive since the days of the Great Crusade and fights on still in the Era Indomitus. Formerly of Craftworld Ulthran and now a leader and guide to the Ynnari, he is perhaps one of the greatest living Eldari psykers, and his name is Eldrad Ulthran. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. It is perhaps of no surprise given his age and species that very little is known about the origins of Eldrad Ulthran. We know from his presence in galactic politics that he was born sometime before M31, probably a fair while before in all honesty, due to said presence being one of relatively good importance. This means that he almost certainly bore witness to the fall of the Aeldari, perhaps in its entirety, fleeing alongside many others aboard one of the Titanic craft worlds, in this case Craftworld Ulthran. This craft world would end up as one of the largest to survive the fall, but would be stuck orbiting the warp rift known as the Eye of Terror that formed the heart of the Aeldari Empire as it had once been. Either due to this presence around the Eye, or perhaps due to mutations caused by it, Ulthran would go on to have a larger proportion of psykers and seers within its population, but Eldrad was already presumably psychic in some way by this time, like all Eldari. Around the time of the fall, the society amongst the craft worlds established what are known as the Paths, focused disciplines to avoid the risk of the Eldari lapsing back into the indulgence, freedom and decadence that led to the fall in the first place. Eldrad presumably walked a few paths in his life, gaining experience and adding to his abilities before eventually taking the walk down the path of the Seer. Here he must have absolutely flourished, his focus on the path and his divinatory abilities causing him to become what is known as lost on the path. In doing so, his classification as a warlock was no more, and he became a Farseer, unable to leave the path of the Seer again, but able to devote his life to his powers and the studies of the skeins of fate. All this happened before he first appears in the annals of history. The Eldari are much more protective of their history than others, but the humans weren't so secretive, and so it's by his interactions with them that we know what he was up to. Eldrad first appears in human history during the Great Crusade, but even before that time he had possibly interacted with humans before as part of a secretive society known simply as the Cabal. This group were composed of members of a variety of races both known and unknown, and they claimed to have been fighting against chaos for eons, perhaps longer than humanity has even existed. Whether Ulthran was a member of the Cabal himself is unclear, no surprises there, but whatever his relation to them had once been, it had soured dramatically by the time the Emperor started moving on the galactic stage. The Cabal had come to believe that the only way to defeat chaos once and for all would be to sacrifice humanity in the process. They had foreseen the Horus heresy after studying the Primarchs and believed that were Horus to win, the ability left within him would see the traitors turn on themselves, wiping out humanity, and in turn the Chaos Gods who invested so heavily in them as pawns and sources of power. Eldrad fundamentally disagreed with this stance, instead claiming that their vision was not a guarantee. Without humanity to hold it back as something of a firebreak, chaos would overrun the entire galaxy including the Eldari rather than turning on itself. As such, the Farseers set about subverting the Cabal's schemes to ensure that the heresy might be avoided entirely, or at least that it would fail were it to end up unavoidable. The full details of these counter schemes are of course lost, but he did reveal himself once before the outbreak of the heresy on the maiden world of Tarsus. There he met with none other than Fulgrim, the Primarch of the Emperor's Children Legion, attempting to warn him of what was to come for Horus, his mortal wounding at the hands of Ugin Temba on Davin, followed by a slow turn to chaos during his recuperation under the care of the Serpent Lodge. However, what Eldrad had either not foreseen or just not accounted for was Thorgrim's relationship with Horus, and in particular, Thorgrim's weaponry. The Phoenician and the War Master were exceptionally good friends, with Horus being second only behind Ferrus Manus in terms of Thorgrim's friendships, so it was always going to be difficult for Thorgrim to accept that Horus might betray the Emperor and the Imperium. Compounding the issue was the fact that by this time, Thorgrim was in possession of the Layer Blade, the demon weapon of Slaanesh, and of course something aligned to She Who Thirsts would have a vendetta against the Aeldari all of its own. The Layer Blade stoked Thorgrim's aggression against Eldrad, and the Farseer realised in turn that due to the presence of the blade, there was no way he could get the Phoenician on side. So instead, a battle was waged as the Eldari tried and failed to kill Thorgrim rather than let him leave Tarsus. But the Primarch not only got away, but also slew a Wraithlord and an Avatar of Cain on his way out. In response to this supposedly perfidious behaviour, Thorgrim subjected Tarsus and other Maiden Worlds to brutal virus bombings, and this supposedly soured Eldrad's trust in humanity quite a lot, as you may expect. However, he pressed on with his goal to subvert the Cabal, even if he may have been resigned to the heresy happening due to his lack of faith in humanity at this point. In fact, subversion seemed to take a back seat for Eldrad when it came to the Cabal, as their dedication to the plan made him view them as a threat to the galaxy as opposed to its potential saviours. As the heresy began and rolled on, he contacted the Cabal agent and human perpetual John Grammaticus, who would travel to the world of Traoris in order to collect an artifact known as the Fulgurite, imbued with a portion of the Emperor's own psychic power. Grammaticus had done this on orders from the Cabal in order to kill the perpetual Primarch Vulcan, but the human had his doubts about his loyalty to the Cabal, and Eldrad played on this. The Farseer gave Grammaticus a way to leave the Cabal, stop betraying humanity, and the Perpetual did so, giving up his own artificial perpetuity in order to cure Vulcan of the madness that had blighted him since his capture by Conrad Kurz. Following the restoration of Vulcan and the Primarch's return to his home of Nocturne, Eldrad contacted Vulcan directly, appearing as an old man known as Deathfire personified. He instructed Vulcan to find 2 items that the Primarch had forged yet had no memory of forging, thank the Emperor for that, before accessing a webway portal that would lead him from Nocturne to Terra via the planet of Caldera. Ulthran then fully revealed himself to Vulcan during his last leg in the webway in the city of Kalistar that had been the focus of the war in the webway years prior. With the route from Kalistar to Terra sealed by the Emperor upon the Golden Throne, the Farseer opened a portal that teleported the Primarch and his companions to the gates of the Imperial Palace itself, though he did not travel through himself for perhaps obvious reasons. However, Vulcan wasn't the only one that Eldrad contacted whilst he was on Nocturne, as he spoke to the secretly loyalist word-bearer Barthusa Narek. The Astartes was recruited by Ulthran to finally deal with the Cabal, and the pair slew several leaders and agents of the organisation, as well as what is believed to be a Slann, before rescuing the now mortal John Grammaticus. In return for his aid, Narek was given the Fulgurite in order to attempt to kill the Word-Bearer's Primarch Lorgar, though he clearly failed unless there's been an incredibly elaborate and concrete ruse going on. Whilst Ulthran took Grammaticus through a webway portal after requiring after Olanius Person, or Olanius Pius as he would later be known. This was Eldrad's last known act in the Horus Heresy, as he seemed content to sit back and let things play out from there. As it is, the Cabal may well have been right, as their vision of the future under a loyalist victory is yet to be proven wrong. Maybe chaos will overrun the galaxy, despite all of Eldrad's meddling. Following the Horus Heresy, I assume that Eldrad returned to Craftworld Ulthwé now that the Cabal was dead and the future was set to play out following the Loyalist win. Whilst there, he would have likely spent much of his time, like many Farseers, studying the fates in order to guide the Craftworld from some sort of trance state. Whether he went to battle for a while is unknown, and his next appearance in the annals of history, again thanks to the humans, is an appearance by proxy as opposed to showing up in person. This came in the War of the Beast in M32 and took the form of an Eldari raid on nothing short of the Imperial Palace itself. It was a small force composed of Harlequins led by the Shadowseer Lariel Ray, and the goal, whilst pretty much suicidal, was to try and deliver a personal message to the Emperor from Eldrad. Unsurprisingly, this mission failed, but Ray stated under interrogation that Ulthran had becalmed the warp in Segmentum Solar to help the humans against the Orcs, so maybe Eldrad hadn't quite lost his faith in humanity yet. However, his tale falls quiet once again after this, due presumably to not meddling in human affairs for a while. Even if he still felt that they were necessary to protect the galaxy from chaos, it wasn't as if Eldrad thought that the humans were his top priority at any point. Even back in the pre-heresy arguments with the Cabal, he was doing everything for the good of the Eldari first and the galaxy second. So whilst we don't know what Eldrad was up to, I assume that it can be summed up by the sentence, reading and manipulating the fates and doing everything for the good of the Eldari to protect the lives of Craftworld Ulthran. He is credited with saving thousands of Eldari lives throughout his own lifetime. It was believed that he actually died in a Blackstone fortress, but this is evidently false, even though he isn't going to be alive for too much longer. You see, like many Farseers of an extremely advanced age, Eldrad's body is beginning to crystallize as his mind becomes more closely intertwined with the wraithbone that forms his craft world. Many Farseers undergoing this crystallization will retreat to a place known as the Dome of Crystal Seers to let their transformation happen as their spirit enters the Infinity Circuit. But not Eldrad. He kept going out to fight and influence, and by now he may not have a choice in the matter, but we'll get to that. If you need an example of Eldrad screwing over the galaxy for the sake of the Eldari, look no further than perhaps the next time he shows up in recorded history, sadly all the way forward in M41. Ulthran launched a series of raids guided by Eldrad's visions against one or more orcish worlds and groups. Sounds innocuous at first, but these raids actually culminated in engineering the rise of none other than the so-called Prophet of the War, Ghazghkull Thraka. Eldrad wasn't even done meddling in creating what would become the greatest Orc warlord in the modern era. It is believed he actually engineered all the events so that the Orcs were diverted to Armageddon. Had he not done so, it is thought that the Orc who would have become dominant instead of Ghazghkull would have attacked Craftworld, and the rough calculus suggests that 10,000 Eldari lives were saved in engineering the second war for Armageddon that cost millions of human lives and led to the third war that has taken millions more. So yeah, don't think that Ulthran saved humanity for humanity's benefit all those years ago. It was for the Eldari, and only the Eldari. Of course, the Farseers' interests aren't just in Ulthran, but rather in the wider Eldari race and its continued survival. Cases in point, the forewarning of Craftworld Yandin concerning the incoming assault of Hive Fleet Kraken, which was costly but could have been worse, and thwarting Thrud in their attempts to infest Craftworld Simhan. The generosity of his foresight even extends to other Eldari factions, as he foresaw them prosecuted a battle against the forces of chaos on the Exodite world known as Haran. Despite all the preparations and even the presence of the legendary Phoenix Lords, it was a hard-fought and costly victory for the Eldari that saw the world renamed Haran Shemash, the world of blood and tears. However, Eldrad hasn't quite had it all his own way when it comes to the forces of the Ruinous Powers. For example, did you ever hear of the time when Warmaster Abaddon tried to massacre the entire Seer Council of Ulthran by attacking a webway portal leading to the Craft world, then cutting off their escape? Well, it happened, though I forget on which planet exactly it was. As it happened, the Eldari won the battle by driving the Warmaster off, but Ulthran was left ruining a missed opportunity and a failed attempt to kill Abaddon in turn. However, probably what most today know Eldrad Ulthran for is the chain of events that would lead to his exile from Craftworld Ulthran. At some point in his long life, perhaps for all of his life, Eldrad was a believer in the idea of Iniad, the Eldari god of the dead that we discussed in our previous log. Ulthran set out to awaken Iniad despite the myth that this could only happen after the destruction of the Eldari, travelling to the crystal moon of Koheria, which would provide the psychic medium necessary to transmit his ritual. Unfortunately for Eldrad and his Harlequin allies, Coheria was held by the Imperium, and the Death Watch were able to send a kill team to the moon even in the face of distractionary raids from elements of Ulthwé and Saimhan. This team, led by Watch Captain Artemis, was able to destabilize Eldrad's ritual, and the moon was destroyed even though the Farseer was already safely away. The failure of this mission, however, did not mean that Iniad would not awaken, and the destruction in Comorra and the resurrection of Ivrain as the god's emissary happened not long after. Eldrad would join up with this new faction known as the Ynnari, and together they would travel to the embattled craft world of Biel Tarn. The Ynnari saved the craft world from being overrun by demonic invaders, and the avatar of Iniad the Yin Khan was created in the aftermath, but Ivrain's ritual to do so and save the Infinity Circuit cost more than a few Eldari souls. Eldrad actually engineered the ritual that allowed the Ynnari to flee the fracture of Biel Tarn to Ulthwé, but 3 of the finest Farseers on the craft world became crystallized as a result. As punishment for both his actions on the Biel Tarn and for those on Coheria, the Seer Council of Ulthwé, or what was left of it, exiled its own leader and chief Farseer, and perhaps rightly so. Whether Eldrad protested much himself is unclear, but many of Ulthwé actually chose to follow him with his departure, and they formed a roving band of their own in an attempt to defy fate and save the Aeldari. They worked alongside Ivrain and the Ynnari for a time, with Eldrad dispatching Ivrain to steal the relic known as the Hand of Darkness from Mortarion of the Death Guard. The pair were also somewhat together during the fall of Cadia, as Eldrad guided the survivors into the Webway so that they may travel to Ultramar with the Ynnari. That said, Eldrad is not strictly a Ynnari member per se, and his group are often doing their own thing as the fates dictate a divergence of paths. He actually made a return to Ulthwé sometime after the opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum, as the craft world's forces have been spread too thin in trying to combat chaos. Returning with a group of Ynnari and Harlequins, Ulthran and his loyalists were able to help see off the demonic invaders of his former home that included Kairos Fateweaver, but as far as I'm aware, his exile still stands, and so he wanders alone. Hopefully he doesn't crystallize before he gets the job done. So ends the tale of Eldrad Ulthran, at least for the moment. Truth be told, this tale probably won't last much longer as Eldrad's body continues to crystallize, but it is a long story indeed that has had a huge influence on galactic events. From the build-up and conclusion of the Horus Heresy to the attempted resurrection of Iliad, Ulthran has been very busy in his attempts to save the Eldari from annihilation, even if he may well have done as much harm as he has good. Ty will have to tell whether his schemes and actions will pan out for the best, but he will almost certainly keep fighting until the day his body finally gives up and he crystallizes entirely. For now though, we must move on. What to do next time? Not sure, honestly. Actually, I know. Let's head back to what I consider home territory, looking at what I feel can be shared about a certain race's societal structure. I'm not going to give all the details, I'm not a propaganda machine, but we will discuss said machine a little next time. Thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.